let's get started. We're 2 minutes,
Sounds good.
10:32, so let's just jump into it. Okay, so we'll start, you guys, just with quick introductions. I'm Sarah Hollingsworth, the founder of Populist, a simplified baby registry platform. And like I mentioned, I'm a mom of two daughters. Amelia is 5 and Zoe is 2. I'm located in Austin, Texas. And one of the most wonderful things about this job and building a simplified baby registry platform was also trying to understand how can I support our parents and family beyond just like the registry stage? So when I was pregnant with my first, I was the first of my friends and sisters to have kids, and I just didn't know literally anything, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of people I could ask. So that's really where the idea for our solicited advice content series and webinar series comes from. And I think everyone on the call can appreciate and agree that when you are preparing to start a family, the unsolicited advice never ends. And so that's sort of
It's
like our
true.
play on where we get the term solicited advice for this webinar series.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit just about me. And where I was going with that story was I get to find experts and come up with topics based on what my
Mhm.
community needs and what I really felt like I needed as a first time mom and really my husband as a first time dad. So combo feeding wasn't something I knew anything about when I was trying to figure out the best way to feed my daughter that made the most sense for me and my family. And
Mhm.
being able to have Mallory here today, I just hope makes this journey a little bit easier for you guys, that you feel more confident in decisions you make moving forward. So I will pause there because the star of the show is Mallory. So please introduce yourself.
Oh, you were too kind. I'm Mallory Whitmore. I'm the founder of The Formula Mom, an online educational platform that provides support and information to formula feeding parents. I have two little ones. I formula fed both of them. Our oldest is almost 8. We combo fed for a couple of weeks and then switched to formula. And then our youngest, who's 5, we did formula from day one with him. And it was a great experience, absolutely the right choice for us. And I started the platform because I needed this kind of information 8 years ago when I was a new parent and I couldn't find it. And I thought, certainly there are other people like me who want this information. And so that's how it got started. And it's been a wild journey the last couple of years. And I'm also now leading education at Bobby. So I'm busy. I'm busy, but I love it, talking about formula day in and day out.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for being here. So let's jump right in. Can
Mhm.
you just level set with everyone in the audience and help us understand what is combo feeding?
Yeah. Combo feeding seems complicated, but it's really simple. It's just offering both breast milk and formula for your baby's nutrition. This can mean expressed pumped milk. It can mean nursing and formula feeding. It can be donor milk. It can look like whatever you want it to look like, but it's as simple as just offering both breast milk and formula.
Okay, amazing. I'm going to pause just one quick. I had someone in the audience just say they couldn't hear. So, um,
Oh.
okay, I wonder if this person's laptop is. Let me go over to the regular comments. Um, oh, it was turned off. Okay, good, Sarah. I'm glad that's all fixed. Okay, so everyone can hear us. We're good to go. So, okay, thank you
Okay,
for
perfect.
that. Um, so, I'm sorry. I saw her question come in. I got a little distracted. But did you?
Sure.
Are there other terms for combo feeding? Did you mention that?
Yeah,
Like
so
what else it could be
sometimes
called? Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's called supplementation
Okay.
or supplemental feeding. Sometimes it's called mixed feeding. Any of those terms are fine. It means the same thing, which is just both breast milk and formula offered.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, when we put out sort of like the announcement that we were doing this session, one of the most common questions we received in our Instagram, TikTok DMs, when you register for the session, you can submit questions ahead of time. One of the most common
Amazing.
questions was, are there similarities in
Mhm.
like sort of like the nutritional makeup of breast milk and formula? And can you just
Mhm.
share, if any, what those are so people really understand the
Yeah.
similarities and or differences?
Yeah, absolutely. So, nutritionally, breast milk and formula are very similar. Breast milk includes bioactive components that formula can't replicate, things like stem cells, hormones, um, good bacteria, growth factors, things like that. But that makes up about 1% of the total composition of breast milk. The majority of breast milk are macronutrients and micronutrients and water. So carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals. That's what formula replicates nearly identically. So the great majority of what your baby's getting from breast milk, they're also going to get from formula in the same ratios. So 40% of your calories from carbohydrates, 50% of your calories from fat, 10% from protein. Nutritionally, they're very, very similar. There's just that extra bioactive component, which certainly has benefits that formula can't replicate just yet.
Okay, so that's really interesting to know. Thank you. When someone is in the aisles of Target or Walmart or the grocery store and they're looking at the options for them, how can we help them sort of think about which one they might want to consider trying for their baby? I mean, that must be like a really tough decision for people
It
to make.
is. It
Yeah,
is. I remember it was like 9 o'clock and I was like crying in the aisle, being like, what do I do? Like, nobody
right.
tells you.
And you're reading
Um,
labels and you're not really like no one really knows what they're reading. Like
no,
it's complicated.
it's complicated. So the first thing I tell parents is ignore the marketing claims. Of course, you'll go in the aisle and it'll be like improves brain development and supports immunity and like strong bones and teeth and like eye visual acuity. And it's like, of course, you want all of that. Um, but the easiest way to approach finding a formula is to ignore all of that,
Okay.
turn the can over, the container over, ignore the nutrition facts because the FDA requires that these are basically all the same across formulas, and look at the ingredients list. That's where you're going
Okay.
to really find the differences between formulas. So all formulas are going to provide the same overall nutrition, the same number of grams of protein, but the ingredients that they use to source those nutrients can vary widely. So similarly, like you can get protein from salmon, or you can get protein from a chicken nugget, or you can get protein from almonds. The sources, the ingredients for those nutrients can vary significantly. So for combo feeding parents or parents who are specifically wanting a formula that's as close to breast milk as possible, you're going to look for a couple of things on that ingredients list. The first thing you're going to look for is lactose as the carbohydrate source. This is typically going to be your first or second ingredient on the list. Lactose is the primary carbohydrate in breast milk. Babies are biologically designed to digest lactose. And so that's the ingredient we want for our carb source in formula, specifically over things like maltodextrin, sucrose, or corn syrup. Lactose is a slower acting carb. It's
Mm-hmm.
metabolized more slowly. It's ideal if your baby can tolerate it. Next, you're going to want to look for added whey protein. This typically looks like whey protein concentrate on the
Mm-hmm.
ingredients label. This helps bring cow's milk up to a whey protein percentage that's more similar to breast milk. So breast milk has like 60-40% whey casein ratio in protein. Cow's milk has like 20-80. So the extra whey protein makes it more similar to breast milk. And then the other thing I always tell parents to look for is DHA.
Mm-hmm.
DHA is a super important omega-3 fatty acid. It's found abundantly in breast milk. The FDA doesn't actually require it in infant formula, which I think is a shame.
So there
But
are
that's
formulas that don't have that then if it's not
there
required.
are.
Okay.
Yeah, there are.
Got it.
Most do. They vary widely in terms of how much. But look for that on the ingredients list. Those are the three I tend to point out: lactose, added whey protein, DHA, if you're looking for a formula that's as close to breast milk as you can.
Okay, got it. And just a quick PSA, you guys will all get the recording to this. You can certainly take all the notes you want, but you'll have access to resources that Mallory has shared, and of course the
Mm-hmm.
recording. So if you need to rewind at any point, you'll be
Yeah.
able to do that. So, okay, thank you for that. I think that's really important because it'll be nice for someone to have on their phone. Okay, if I'm going to go shopping for a formula, I just need to like pay attention to some of these, like the most important ingredients. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. Um, how so another question that came up, and this was really challenging for me too. I remember, I breastfed Amelia initially, and that was the feeding plan I wanted. I hadn't considered any other until I really had to have a hard conversation with myself in the fact that I knew intrinsically that I just wasn't producing enough milk. I
Okay.
took her to multiple lactation consultant appointments at the hospital where we delivered. So I went to make sure the latch was right, everything looked
Yeah.
good, but she was losing weight. So
Mm-hmm.
it just, So there was a few really complications in the beginning, and I was so sad to have to
Yeah.
start to think about like introducing formula, not because, well, I was nervous to introduce formula. I didn't know enough about it. I was scared to introduce formula, but I
Mhm.
also was putting so much pressure on myself. I felt so guilty. Like, gosh,
Yeah.
my body just delivered and created this beautiful human being, and
Mhm.
now it's failing me, and I'm not producing enough breast milk. There was just so much guilt. I was sad. I didn't know enough information about formula, so I just wasn't educated enough. But I'll get into some more specific questions. But for anyone on the call, or, you know, what would you say to someone who felt like that or is feeling
Yeah.
like that? Like just a little apprehensive and sad and scared
Mhm.
about maybe changing their initial feeding journey.
Yeah, well, first I would say I have been there too, and it
Mm-hmm.
is hard. It's hard feeling like basically after birth you have one job, which is to
Yeah,
feed this baby, and if you can't do it, then you're like, well, what am I what can I do? What am I doing
right.
here? So those feelings that you describe are super normal and they make sense given the situation. It is hard. It's normal to have grief. It's normal to have guilt. Um, or I should say rather it's common.
Mm-hmm.
It's common to have those feelings. I think something that helped me is sort of switching my mindset to when you have new information or new data points um, involved, and in your case, it's your baby's not gaining weight,
Mm-hmm.
choosing to make a different decision isn't failure, it's wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we can make all the decisions that we want when we don't have the complete information. But once we have the complete information, making a different decision is not failure. And ultimately, our responsibility is not to breastfeed our babies, it's to make sure that they're growing and thriving. And so sometimes that means putting aside our own hopes and dreams for the betterment of our babies. And like, that's hard. It's hard. And what I do appreciate though is that for people like me and you, we get to learn that lesson early. It doesn't make it
Right.
easier,
Mm-hmm.
but parenthood and motherhood is nothing if not putting down our own hopes and dreams for the betterment of our babies in various ways over and over again. And so being able to sort of strengthen that muscle early, even though it's painful, I think for me has made me a better mother overall because I learned
Yeah,
quickly, you know, I have to make the hard decisions that are right for my family, even though they're hard.
totally. Yeah, thank you very much. We have someone in the comment who just shared that she does have those feelings. Her son is a tongue tie, so he isn't efficient at nursing and it impacts her supply. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many things both related to the mom's physiology and physical makeup and the baby's physiology and physical makeup. There's so many variables that you just
Mm-hmm.
don't know when you're pregnant that you might
Right.
face that
Right.
impact your ability to breastfeed successfully.
Yeah, it's so true. Okay, so the baby is Earthside. We are producing breast milk, feeding the
Mhm.
baby. Now we are thinking about combo feeding.
Mhm.
How do we introduce formula? One of the things that we talked about on Monday when we were preparing for this webinar was certain times of day that
Mhm.
may or may not be better to introduce formula. Can you walk everyone through what does this process look like? I mean, it's different for everybody, but can you help us sort of understand
Yeah.
when we're ready to introduce formula, how should we think about this?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, first thing I would say, try not to introduce formula and bottles at the same time. So, if you have breast milk that you've expressed or you can pump, get your baby acclimated to bottles first. So then you're only tackling one challenge at a time. Sometimes it's hard when parents try to introduce formula and bottles at the same time, figuring out is it a formula issue or is it a bottle issue. So, if you can, introduce bottles first, get your babies comfortable. When you first go to introduce formula, it's recommended to introduce it in the morning. Number one, your baby's likely to be hungrier, which makes them more likely to accept the formula compared to, middle of the afternoon when they're more satiated from feeding throughout the day. And then
Mm-hmm.
also because sometimes formula has ingredients that babies haven't been exposed to in their mother's breast milk, like milk protein, soy protein, corn. And if there's a reaction, we want that to occur during the day so that we can see it. We don't want to give the first formula bottle at 10 p.m., then put the baby down. And if they have a reaction, we don't know. So introducing in the morning can help for those reasons. And then honestly, it can look like whatever you want it to look like. It can look like just that one bottle and you do one bottle a day for a little bit, or it can look like that one bottle and then every other bottle for the rest of the day. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
Okay, thank you. So, just to clarify, introduce bottles first, meaning
Mm-hmm.
what? Like maybe put your breast milk in bottles
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
first?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we had a question. Someone was just like, wait, I don't understand what that means exactly. So,
Yes, yeah. Get your baby used to the bottle with breast milk first, if you can. If you've been exclusively nursing and plan to introduce formula.
okay, thank you. Um, can you mix? I see different things on the internet all the
Mhm.
time, which is why these webinars are
Yeah.
so important to me so that we can sort of like demystify, get down to the bottom
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
things, the truth. Can you mix breast milk and formula?
You can combine breast milk and formula in the same bottle, provided that you make your formula according to the instructions on the package first. So if you're using powdered formula or concentrate formula, mix it with water before you add it to the breast milk. Never use breast milk to reconstitute the formula. You'll end up with a really nutrient dense product that's not appropriate for your baby's kidneys. So always prepare your formula first. And then you can combine breast milk and formula in the same bottle. Some of the benefits of doing this are that it can help your baby acclimate to the taste of the formula. Sometimes babies are finicky about the taste. Adding breast milk can help make it more familiar and more palatable to them. The downside of mixing breast milk and formula in the same bottle is that you have to follow formula food safety rules in that case. So if you've been pumping and you're used to bottle feeding with just breast milk, you might be familiar with just leaving it out on the counter for,
Mm-hmm.
4 hours at a time, or it can stay good in the fridge for a couple of days. Once you mix it with formula, you have to follow the formula rules, which is only good at 2 hours at room temp, only good for 24 hours in the fridge. And you have to toss it once it's hit your baby's lips within an hour. And so you do run the risk, if you combine them in the same bottle, that you're going to have to pour the mixture down the drain, which is so painful to have
Yes.
to pour out breast milk.
Okay, so this
So
is
some
really
people
important
prefer to
information. Thank you.
alternate.
Okay, great. So
Mm-hmm.
you can combine formula and breast
Mm-hmm.
milk. Make your formula first. Your breast milk
Yep.
is not, do not supplement the formula like with your breast milk. It doesn't replace
Mm-hmm.
water.
No.
You follow the formula guidelines for health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
Can you freeze? I asked this on Monday because I really just didn't know. And
Yeah.
I don't feel like any question is silly, but can
No.
you freeze that combination?
No.
Okay.
No. You can't freeze it, unfortunately. Some of the nutrients in the formula can degrade. So
Okay.
only 24 hours in the fridge if you combine before you've offered it to your baby.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So when let's so we're not mixing right now for this question.
Okay.
Um, how should let me see what this person asked. Do you see babies or parents giving like one full bottle of formula and then the next full bottle is breast milk?
Mhm.
And can parents do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and some babies truly do not care. They're like
Okay.
happy for whatever, they're happy to eat. They don't care if it's a formula bottle or a breast milk bottle, which that in and of itself can be kind of painful if you're like, I've
Yeah,
worked
sure.
so hard to pump this milk, my baby doesn't even care. But yeah, you can alternate every other bottle. Some people will send all formula bottles to daycare and then they'll, use breast milk at home or they'll nurse at night. Some people will send breast milk to daycare and they will use formula at night because they want their partner to help and they want to be able to, have more consolidated sleep. Some people will, stop pumping at 3 months and they've got a freezer stash and they'll just do one bottle of breast milk every day for the rest of the first year until it goes out. Runs out. Some people just do one formula bottle a day so that they know that they have a 6 hour stretch where they aren't responsible for feeding a baby and that feels good to them. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's whatever works for you and your family and what works for your baby.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Um, should people be supplementing when they're combo feeding with like vitamin D drops? Can they?
Mhm.
Do you know
Yeah.
what that sort of landscape looks like, and can you share a little bit
Mhm.
about what supplements might be?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question because we know that the majority of babies in the US are not meeting daily recommended vitamin D values. Typically, a baby would have to drink at least 30 ounces of formula every single day to get their recommended daily value of vitamin D. 30 ounces is a lot for some babies.
Mm-hmm.
The AAP recommends anywhere from 24 to 32 ounces. So a baby could be fully formula fed and still not meet that requirement if they're drinking like 26 or 28 ounces a day. So vitamin D supplementation is recommended for all breastfed babies, all combo fed babies, and some exclusively formula fed babies, depending on their total intake. Bobby actually has more vitamin D per serving than your average formula. So a exclusively formula fed Bobby baby would only need to hit 26 ounces versus 30. And Bobby also does offer vitamin D supplements, little dropper, 3 drops a day, for those who need supplementation. But yeah, it's really important, especially because you're not supposed to take your babies out in direct sunlight. Babies aren't getting a lot of vitamin D from solids when they, hit 5, 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, supplementation is recommended if you're combo feeding, unless you hit that, 26 for Bobby, 30 ounces with other formulas of daily formula intake.
Can you put the supplements in the bottle, or
Mm-hmm.
do you need to give them to them
Yeah.
separate?
You can put them in the bottle.
Okay,
Ideally, you want to make sure your baby finishes the bottle. So you want to,
true.
if you're going to do that, put it in a bottle where your baby's pretty consistent about taking the full bottle. You can also put it on a clean spoon. You can also drop them directly in your baby's mouth, which to me feels like it would be like wrangling a raccoon, but you can do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, are there signs parents should look for that might indicate they need to change or try a different formula?
Mhm.
And can you
Yeah,
share what those are?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will say up front that it can be really tricky because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these signs are also just normal infant digestion. Like we know all babies are gassy, all babies have reflux sometimes, all babies have trouble pooping at first because their digestive systems are just really new and immature and trying to figure out how to work efficiently. So sometimes those can indicate that there's a challenge with the formula, and sometimes it just means you have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Some more obvious signs are things like excessive mucus or blood in the stool, even like microscopic blood. This can indicate that there's inflammation and irritation in the gut, typically as a result of an allergy, continued exposure to an allergen. Same thing with any sort of like widespread pervasive rash, whether it's eczema or hives, projectile vomiting, vomiting that's affecting your baby's weight gain. Poor weight gain in general can mean that your baby's not absorbing nutrients appropriately because they've got that inflammation in the gut. So those are the big things that we look for. But if you know your baby best, and so
Mm-hmm.
if you feel like your baby's just not happy, they're not doing well, you can't soothe them, even though you're trying all the things, especially if this is a change after you've introduced the formula, then absolutely have a convo with your pediatrician about that. And a formula switch may help.
Okay, thank you. Um, so when people are going to be using a bottle, whether it's for breast milk or formula, are there certain like characteristics of bottles they should be looking for? Because this
Yeah.
is like, again, when you go and buy formula, there's so many
Hmm.
options. And the same thing for
Yeah.
pretty much any baby product
Yeah.
out there.
Hmm.
There is no shortage of bottle
Yeah.
options. So, what should a parent be looking for when selecting a bottle?
Yes, this is a great question, especially because if you're combo feeding and you're wanting to continue nursing, there's a lot of concern about nipple confusion or like nipple preference, bottle preference, things like that. And generally speaking, that's been sort of debunked, but there's still, parents still get concerned about it. So, if you're wanting a bottle that's most similar to the breast, you're actually going to want to avoid the bottles that market themselves as most similar to the breast. And those tend to be the ones that are rounded, that look like, a boob, and then they have, just a little sort of teat sticking up.
Mm-hmm.
Those are less ideal than nipples that have a gradual slope. So we want to think of a bottle nipple and I appreciate that I can say this say this here because of the content, but that looks like a soft nipple and not an erect nipple, if that makes
Okay.
sense. Because
Mm-hmm.
when your baby's nursing, they're getting a soft nipple, and that's going to be gradually sloped. It's not going to be abruptly pointed. And that's what we're looking for in our bottle nipples too. So some of favorites of mine include Dr. Brown's, Even Flow feeding. Their Balance Plus nipples are great. The MAM nipples can be really good. But ultimately, whatever bottle your baby will take is the best bottle for you. So don't feel
Mm-hmm.
bad if you're like, oh, like I have a really abrupt bottle nipple. This is bad. If your baby will take it and they're gaining weight and they have a good latch on it, totally fine. But if you're just starting, some of those more gradually sloped Dr. Brown's, Even Flow, feeding, Balance Plus are top of the line, in my opinion.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. One of the questions that came in earlier was a mom said that her baby nurses really fast. So when she's
Mhm.
thinking about selecting a bottle and now a nipple, should she be using a fast flow nipple?
Yeah, that's a great question. It can be hard to quantify how fast a baby nurses and also how
Mm-hmm.
fast a nipple flow is. There's no standardization among nipple flows. So, like a Dr. Brown size 2 is not standardized against a Komotomo size 2. So there
Oh, okay.
takes yeah, it's a total mess. And the age ranges are also totally made up. You know, one will be like 0 to 8 weeks, and the other will be like 0 to 3 months. It's all just a free for all.
Great. As if it's
So
not hard enough.
I know, right? I know. And so ultimately it's a little bit of trial and error. I will say though that gravity does a lot of the work most of the time when you're bottle feeding, compared to when you're nursing. And so even slower flow nipples tend to it's easier to withdraw milk from slower flow nipples than it typically is from a breast. But if you know your baby's a fast nurser, if you know that you have a strong letdown, and that your baby tolerates that strong letdown, I would have a variety of nipple flows available because you might need to move up. Generally, you'll need to move up if your baby is collapsing the nipple, like they're sucking on it enough that it's collapsing the nipple, if they're taking in a lot more sucks than swallows, and if they start to act frustrated after getting just a little bit of milk and they're like over it, then it's a good indication that you need to move up a size.
So this is, kind of interesting. And I wonder if we should share with people on the line because when I was pregnant with Amelia, when I had to go buy bottles, I had no idea that there were different types of speeds on
Mm-hmm.
like nipple flow. So for the people on the line that are in this for the very first time and they're like,
Yeah.
what on earth are they talking about? Can you just give
Mm-hmm.
like a quick sort
Yeah.
of explanation that there are these things exist?
There are, yeah, and it really there are a ton of different sizes. There's like preemie sizes, and then there's like X ones for like thickened formula. There's a whole bunch, but basically, the nipple flow refers to the width of the hole in the nipple, and that controls how easily the milk flows through. So obviously, if you have a smaller sort of pinprick hole in the nipple, it's going to take a lot more work on the part of your baby to pull that milk through compared to if you have like a pencil tip hole and then the milk can just
Mm-hmm.
kind of gravity can pull it through. So as your baby gets older and as they get more efficient with feeding and as they develop more muscle strength and better coordination of their sucking and swallowing and breathing, they might prefer a faster flow. And not all babies do. Some babies are perfectly fine on a slow flow the entire time. Others, by 8 weeks or 12 weeks, they're like frustrated and taking an hour to bottle feed. And it's like, okay, maybe we should try the next size up.
Yeah, I remember Amelia being like infuriated that the
Yeah.
bottle, like the nipple was so slow, but I did not
Yeah.
know that I had the slowest flow on the
Mm-hmm.
MAM. Like I just did not
Yeah.
know any different. I just was like, this is the one and only nipple, so I don't know what to do, but turns
Yeah.
out it's not.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, it's just
I had the opposite experience, which is that I had a brand new baby and I didn't realize I had like a level 2 nipple. And it was like drowning her almost. It was like, flowing out the side of her mouth and into her neck. And I was like, what is the problem? And then I was like, oh, this is not the right nipple for her.
yeah, no.
It's a learning curve.
like every step is learning curve. So I'm so happy
Hmm.
people are like asking us questions. So I'm going to pull up this one clarifying question from Carlos. So when you
Yeah.
say up a size, do you mean size or flow, or is it the same thing?
It's generally the same thing. Some brands will call it a nipple size, others will call it a nipple flow. So, like Dr. Brown's, you can go up from size 1 to size 2. In other brands, you might go up from slow flow to medium flow. It's the same general thing. It's just two different terms, which again does not make it easier for your like sleep deprived new parent who's trying to figure it out.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you. I'm going to, let's see here. So Elizabeth is asking, given that bottle preference is so individual to the baby, are there bottle samples that we can buy before committing to purchasing a bunch of one kinds? What's the best method there? I know of
Mhm.
one. I'm reluctant to say because they're a competitor, but it exists and it's an
Mhm.
option if this is important to you. Babylist does make a bottle box
Mhm.
that you can buy from their shop on their website. So I would
Yeah.
never withhold information if that's important to you because it does
Mhm.
matter. So if you want
Yeah.
to sample bottles, that's the only option I know of,
That's the
Mallory.
yeah, that's
Any
the only one
others?
I'm familiar with. What I typically suggest is reach out to the people in your life, your friends, your siblings, your neighbors, and see what bottles they use and if they'll let you borrow one and sort of
Yeah.
assemble your own little kit and then see what your baby prefers before you go out and buy 12 or 16. That tends to be helpful. And my guess is if you've got people in your life that have babies, you will compile a wide variety because people use
Yes.
all sorts of them.
And everyone will love giving you their suggestions. So
Oh,
just
yeah.
know that when you ask, you will be given maybe more than one
That's
response.
true.
So
That's true.
be willing to receive the information because people love telling you what worked for them and what didn't.
Yeah. Mhm.
We did try a few. It's so funny because my daughters didn't use the same bottle, which I assumed they would.
Yep.
Amelia really loved Ma'am, and Zoe really loved Komotomo. So those were the two that
Yeah.
ended up working for our family. But
Mhm.
also, I would have loved a glass option, but I sent Amelia to
Ah,
daycare starting at 12 weeks old, and they didn't
yeah.
accept glass. So I had to find like an alternative.
Mhm.
So that's something to consider
Yeah.
if that is a childcare option that you're considering.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Even just in the past couple of years, we've seen an increase in options for glass, silicone, and steel. So
Oh,
if that's
steel.
something that, yeah, and they're heavy and expensive, both the glass and the steel. But if that's something you're interested in, there are more options now than there even were like 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. It's I just had a call with someone yesterday and I was like, could you imagine one building your baby registry right now, which
Oh my
this is
gosh,
the world
no.
I'm in to simplify it for
Yeah.
parents, but like there's even
Uh-huh.
more stuff for every category. So
Yes.
we have an extremely tough job to like simplify these decisions for people just like a little bit,
Mhm.
but also there's better stuff. There's better formula now. You know, Bobby wasn't an option when I
No.
was figuring out this route for Amelia. And,
Mhm.
you know, Zoe was a Bobby baby. And,
Mhm.
you know, I'm just so thankful for all the better options that exist now
Mhm.
for parents to be making, you know, such
Yeah.
amazing informed decisions and all
Mhm.
the amazing choices they have. So,
Yeah.
okay, the time on these webinars fly by. We have 10 minutes left. So if
Sure.
there are any other burning questions that you guys in the audience have, please put them in the chat. We will get them answered from Mallory, time willing. So no question is a silly one. One
No.
of the questions that came in during registrations was, is
Mhm.
there a method for mixing formula and breast milk? Does one go before the
Okay.
other? Does it matter?
Yeah.
Is there a formula?
Is there a formula
Pun
for the
intended.
combo feeding? Yes, pun always intended. Not really. The only
Okay.
thing that you want to be cautious of is the temperature. So historically, the recommendation has been like they have to be the exact same temperature. That has gone out of favor from the AAP in the last year or two.
Okay.
But you want to make sure that you're not mixing breast milk and extremely hot formula. If your pediatrician has recommended that you add your formula to boiling water, wait for it to cool down because we don't want it to be above body temperature or you risk killing off some of those bioactive components in the breast milk. And that's sad. So, any body temperature, 98, 100 degrees or less. It doesn't matter if your formula is warm and your breast milk's refrigerated. We just want to avoid it being incredibly hot. But yeah, you can, if your formula, if you make your formula in the bottle, you can pour your breast milk from a bag on the top. If your breast milk was, expressed into a bottle, you can add your water and then your formula powder right in there and
Okay.
mix. Whatever works for you.
Okay, good to know. Let's see here. I'm gonna pull up another question from someone. All right. Elena, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm gonna put you up on the screen. Um, Her question is, I've been using formula and breast milk pretty much from the start with her babies. We recently switched to Simply Bliss per her pediatrician's recommendation, but the baby seems to be having issues digesting at night. Would you recommend her trying Bobby, or should I try switching her to breast milk solely at night?
Yeah. So this is a good question. So any milk-based formula that uses intact milk protein, those milk proteins are going to be bigger in size and tougher in texture than the type of protein that we typically see in breast milk. So sometimes even babies who've had no issue with breast milk or even dairy in their mom's breast milk will have trouble digesting milk proteins, cow milk proteins. So if your baby seems to have no issue during the day when they're upright and they're moving and the digestion is working a little bit better, you can try flip-flopping those and seeing what works. If you're like, I don't know, still not working, I actually would not recommend Bobby in this situation because the protein structure is similar to Pure Bliss. Baby's Only A2 is another great option that has smaller, softer proteins. The A2 beta casein protein in there is similar to what you find in breast milk. Those can be a little bit easier to digest for those babies where it's like not an intolerance, but they just like are having trouble with the cow milk protein. The Baby's Only A2 can be a good fit.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Elena, hopefully that answers your question. If there's a follow up, let us know. We can answer it here, or we can have Mallory or someone from the Bobby team get back to
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah,
But good
absolutely.
luck. That's always hard. And yeah, the digestion issues are really tough because then everyone is
Mm-hmm.
awake. And I really feel for
Yeah.
you trying to
Yeah.
navigate that. So, okay, let's see here. I'm going to pull up a question from Kat. Can you speak to the changes we can expect
Yes.
in babies' BM, which is bowel
Mm-hmm.
movements, as we start introducing formula? I've recently started combo feeding and I'm trying to get acclimated to formula BM. I'm
Yeah.
sensitive. Let's see here. I'm sensitive to my baby's BM given a suspected milk protein allergy.
Yes, this is a great question. And I think a lot of people aren't prepared for this and then they freak out and they're like, oh, is something wrong? So, generally, when you introduce formula, you should look for changes in stool color, stool texture, and stool frequency. Generally, when you introduce formula, the color is going to go from yellow, which is typical with breast milk, to green or even dark green. That is a result of the iron in the formula. So nothing to be concerned about, but to be aware of because people will message. They'll be like, "My baby's formula is like hunter green." I'm like, "It's fine. It's normal." So your color may change, your frequency may change. Generally speaking, breastfed babies poop more often than formula-fed babies, so you may see a decrease in frequency. And then texture. Breastfed poops tend to be really soft, liquidy, seedy. Formula-fed poops tend to be a little pastier. Again, nothing to be concerned about if that's what you see, but those are the changes that we tend to expect and are typical for formula fed or combo fed babies.
Awesome. Thank you. What about how did you like to clean your bottles?
Yes, great question. The dishwasher.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, so I, like most people, I registered for a sterilizer. I thought I had to sterilize all the bottles. What I know now is that if your baby wasn't premature and isn't immunocompromised, you don't actually have to sterilize your bottles routinely. The dishwasher is a great option, or just warm soapy water. The key, if you're hand washing your bottles, is to make sure you have a designated basin to soak your bottles away from like your spatulas and your like
Mm-hmm.
raw meat knife and all of that. So a designated basin, it can just be like a large Tupperware, a designated bottle brush, again, not your like scrub daddy or your sponge for your other dishes, and then somewhere to air dry your bottles because towels harbor bacteria. So a bottle rack or something like that, whether you're hand washing or pulling stuff out of the dishwasher if it's still wet. So dishwasher, absolutely. And I also didn't know that if you're going to be hand washing for more than 5 minutes, it is more energy efficient and wastes less water to use the dishwasher. I
Yeah.
felt bad because I was like, I just have bottles. I don't want to run a whole load. But then I was like, oh, this is a win for everybody, a win for the environment and a win for me. You're
I'm
running the
so glad I asked you
dishwasher.
that question because I didn't know your answer was going to be the dishwasher, but I'm so happy it was because it's just, I want parents to know that you don't need to register and buy for everything under the sun that
No.
the companies tell you need, including
Mm-hmm.
specific ways that you must clean your bottle. I use the
Yeah.
dishwasher too. I took
Mm-hmm.
the basin. If you are having a hospital delivery, there'll be like this gray
Yes. Steal it.
basin where
Yes.
they'll
Steal it.
put some of your like pump products or whatever in.
Mm-hmm.
They'll let you take that home. That's what I used to soak my bottles. Then I let them air dry on a upright drying rack. And then to sterilize every once in a while, I would just put in a pot of boiling water.
Yep.
Don't
Same.
forget they're in there. Do yourself a favor and set a timer because I have
Yes.
accidentally melted bottles and nipples
You
because I
can warp
forgot they
them.
were in
Yeah.
there. Your
Mm-hmm.
baby starts fussing, and all of a sudden you forget anything else around you is happening. So
Yeah.
please set a timer if you're going to sterilize them in boiling
Mm-hmm.
water.
Yeah.
Um, okay, Shelby, great question. I'm going to pull this up for you, Mallory. Can a combo feed baby BMs be too watery?
Yeah, this is a good question. And it's hard to conceptualize like what, you go to the pediatrician, they'll be like, loose stool is normal. And you're like, well, what does loose mean? And so liquidy generally is fine. Watery, if it's like really light, clear, foamy, things like that, can tend to mean there's an intolerance somewhere, including with lactose, especially if your baby has had a recent stomach bug or recently received the rotavirus oral vaccine. Sometimes that can wipe out the lactase enzyme in the gut for a week or two, and then that can lead to really like watery, foamy, kind of like weird stools. But if you mean liquidy, no. Even if it's just like straight, and that's how you get the blowouts, right? It's just like liquid on the side of the
Sometimes.
leg. Generally, totally fine.
Okay, thank you. Carlos has two questions. The way we were sharing, like how to clean them, sterilize them, dishwasher, boiling water, this all goes for plastic bottles as well, dishwasher, boiling water, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And oh,
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, make sure you put it in the top rack of your dishwasher. Um, it's going to get less heat that way. And then if you're concerned about microplastics, which has become a larger topic of conversation in the last couple of years, if you're using plastic bottles and you want to minimize exposure to microplastics, the recommendation is to wash how you normally do and then rinse them in cool water 3 times before you let them dry. That's supposed to flush out any sort of particles that may have leached. So
All right.
I don't know personally if I had a baby, if I would be that concerned. Maybe that makes me, I don't know, some sort of bad person, but that is the recommendation if that is something that concerns you personally.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so we are at time. My favorite question I love asking all of our webinar guests
Mm-hmm.
is Mallory, of all the things we've talked about and tried to cover in 45 minutes,
Yes.
if the people are listening to this, if they take one thing away from
Mm-hmm.
you or anything about combo feeding or what have you, what is the one thing you want parents to know and leave with?
Yeah. I would say, I mean, I could talk about this for another 45 minutes, but I will leave everybody with feeding your baby and how you feed your baby is going to be as unique to your family as your baby is, as your support system is, as your context is, your job, your body, your baby's body. Um, and so, because of that, it's okay to do whatever you specifically need. It's okay if it doesn't look like what your neighbor's doing because your neighbor doesn't have the same set of variables that you do. It's okay if it doesn't look like what you thought you were going to be doing because now you've got way more information than you did then. So I think that's the key piece. It can look like whatever works for you and whatever gets you to the end goal, which is a thriving, developing, gaining weight, happy, meeting milestones baby. And however you get there is the right way to get there.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, And that goes for so many things that
It
you
goes
guys
for
are
everything. I know.
experiencing, about to experience. And
Mhm.
you're going to know intrinsically and intuitively what the right thing is to do for you and your family. And just don't let anyone persuade you otherwise. Like, you are just going to know. And do it with confidence, hopefully. And like Mallory said, wisdom. And um, it's going to be great and exciting. And
It's gonna be great.
they're going to be fed. Fed is best.
Yes.
And you'll know. So,
Hmm.
Mallory, thank you for your time. What an
Yes.
honor it
Thanks for
was to
having
have
me.
you. Thank you so much. Paige, she is behind the scenes, but she works so
Yes.
hard. Paige is at Bobby. So, Paige, everything
Hmm.
you are doing for families across the country and beyond, thank you. And you guys will all receive the post webinar email. It'll include a link to the recording, resources we discussed. I'll include some links to some, bottle brands that we loved,
Hmm.
Mallory recommended, etc. So have a wonderful weekend. Thank you. And Mallory,
Yeah.
again, thank you. And we'll
Thank
see you
you all
guys
for
next
being
time.
here. This was great.
All right. See y'all.
Bye.